The psychological reversal was total. The invincible Ottoman navy was broken, scattered, running for their lives. By late afternoon, approximately 200 Ottoman galleys had been sunk or captured. Perhaps 30,000 Ottoman soldiers, sailors, and rowers were dead. The sea was carpeted with wreckage, broken masts, floating corpses, shattered oars, debris from hundreds of destroyed ships. But alongside the death came liberation. As Christian soldiers captured Ottoman galleys, they found the rowing benches filled with Christian slaves, men who had been captured in previous battles or raids and condemned to row Ottoman galleys until they died. There were approximately 15,000 of these galley slaves across the Ottoman fleet, and now they were being freed. Can you imagine that moment? You've been chained to a rowing bench for years, perhaps decades. You've rowed in darkness, been beaten, watched fellow slaves die beside you and be thrown overboard. You expect to die the same way. And then suddenly Christian soldiers are breaking your chains, pulling you up into daylight, telling you you're free. Many freed slaves couldn't process it. They wept uncontrollably, kissed the hands of their liberators, or simply stared at the sky in shock, seeing sun and clouds for the first time in years. The liberation scenes were deeply emotional. Soldiers found slaves who had been chained so long the iron had grown into their flesh. Removal required surgical cutting. They found men who had been rowing blind because years in darkness had destroyed their vision. They found entire families, fathers and sons chained side by side, brothers who had been captured together. The freed slaves spoke dozens of languages: Italian, Spanish, Greek, Slavic dialects, representing the breadth of Ottoman raiding across the Mediterranean. As darkness fell on October 7th, the guns finally fell silent. The Battle of Lepanto was over after approximately 5 hours of continuous combat, the most destructive 5 hours in naval warfare history up to that point. The Gulf of Patras had transformed into a graveyard. The water was no longer blue but gray-brown with ash and blood. Wreckage covered the surface, thousands of broken oars, shattered masts, pieces of hull, floating corpses beyond counting. The smell was overwhelming: gunpowder, blood, human waste, burning wood, a stench so powerful it made breathing difficult. Survivors on both sides drifted among the wreckage, clinging to debris, calling for help in languages nobody understood. Christian ships worked through the night, pulling survivors from the water, enemy and ally alike, because at that point common humanity outweighed religious warfare. Ottoman prisoners were taken by the thousands, but treated relatively well. No torture, no revenge killings for Bragadino. Don John had issued strict orders. Prisoners would be treated according to military honor. Don John himself stood on the Real's battered deck as night fell, looking across the destruction his fleet had wrought. He was physically and emotionally exhausted, still wearing armor dented by musket balls and sword strikes, his face blackened by powder smoke. Around him, his flagship was a wreck. The deck splintered and blood-stained, sails torn, rigging shot through. But it floated, and the battle was won. A messenger presented him with Ali Pasha's severed head, expecting praise. Don John looked at it for a long moment, then ordered it cast into the sea. "Give him dignity in death," he said quietly. "He fought bravely for his faith as we fought for ours." That single act of respect for a fallen enemy became legendary. It showed that Don John understood this wasn't just about killing, but about what kind of victors Christians would be. When the Holy League fleet began returning toward Christian ports, they carried with them proof of one of history's most decisive naval victories. The captured Ottoman banners numbered in the dozens, including the Sultan's personal flag from the Sultana. Captured cannons, weapons, and treasure-filled Christian holds. Most importantly, they carried 15,000 freed slaves who were tangible evidence of victory's meaning. The journey back to Messina took weeks. The fleet was damaged, moving slowly, stopping frequently to repair ships barely seaworthy enough to continue. When they finally reached Messina in late October, the entire city erupted in celebration. Church bells rang continuously for hours. People lined the harbor walls, screaming themselves hoarse. Freed slaves stumbled off ships and knelt on shore, kissing the ground, weeping with joy at standing on free Christian soil. The news spread across Europe with shocking speed. Writers carried word to Rome, Madrid, Venice, Vienna, eventually reaching every Christian kingdom. The reaction was euphoric. For decades, the Ottoman Empire had seemed unstoppable, an existential threat that would eventually overwhelm Christian Europe. Lepanto shattered that inevitability. Pope Pius V, hearing the news in Rome, wept openly and declared October 7th a holy feast day. The Feast of Our Lady of Victory, later renamed the Feast of the Holy Rosary. In Venice, celebrations lasted for weeks. The city that had lost Cyprus and feared destruction now saw hope for reclaiming what had been taken. In Spain, King Philip II ordered celebrations and Thanksgiving masses, recognizing that Spanish naval supremacy had been definitively proven. But alongside celebration came sobering reflection. The Christian fleet had lost approximately 7,500 men killed, and perhaps twice that wounded, casualties that would haunt families across the Mediterranean. Entire ships' crews had been annihilated. The Venetian contingent in particular had suffered terribly, losing Admiral Barbaro and thousands of sailors and marines. The war had been won, but at crushing cost. Don John himself never fully celebrated the victory. Friends who knew him said he was changed by Lepanto. The young, carefree commander who had sailed east was replaced by someone older, darker, burdened by memories of violence he could never forget. For the Ottoman Empire, Lepanto was a catastrophe on multiple levels. Militarily, they had lost their main battle fleet. 200-plus galleys destroyed or captured, tens of thousands of experienced sailors and soldiers dead, their best admiral killed. Psychologically, the myth of Ottoman naval invincibility was shattered. Strategically, their plans for Mediterranean domination had to be abandoned. The Sultan, receiving news of the disaster, reportedly said, "The Christians have singed my beard," minimizing the defeat publicly while privately recognizing its significance. But the Ottomans were resilient. Within a year, they had rebuilt much of their fleet, constructing 150-plus new galleys. But these new ships lacked experienced crews, and more importantly, Ottoman admirals now operated with caution born from understanding that Christian fleets could destroy them. The long-term impact of Lepanto was profound but complex. The battle didn't end the Ottoman Empire or even Ottoman naval power permanently. They remained formidable for decades, but it ended their offensive expansion in the Mediterranean. Never again would Ottoman fleets threaten to dominate Christian waters or seriously attempt to conquer major Christian territories. The psychological shift was equally significant. European states that had viewed Ottoman power with fatalistic dread now saw them as beatable, which encouraged resistance and eventual rollback of Ottoman conquests. The Holy League itself didn't last. Within months, old rivalries resurfaced. Venice made separate peace with the Ottomans. Spain turned attention to other theaters. But the memory of Lepanto remained as proof that Christian unity could achieve what seemed impossible. For Don John of Austria, the victory made him a legendary figure, but also marked the peak of his life. He would campaign again, govern territories, but nothing would match the glory of Lepanto. He died in 1578, only 31 years old, of fever in the Netherlands while commanding Spanish forces against Protestant rebels. But his name remained synonymous with the greatest naval victory in European history. The young commander who unified a divided fleet and broke Ottoman naval supremacy. Today, Lepanto stands as one of history's decisive battles. Not because it ended a war, it didn't, but because it ended a trajectory. The Ottoman Empire's expansion into Christian Europe, which had seemed inevitable, was stopped. The psychological dominance that made Christian states fear Ottoman power was broken. The Mediterranean, which had been gradually becoming an Ottoman lake, remained contested water where Christian and Muslim powers would compete on more equal terms for centuries. And perhaps most importantly, Lepanto demonstrated that unity could overcome division, that courage could defeat numerical advantage, that battles could genuinely change historical trajectories. The echoes of those 5 hours on October 7, 1571, when the sea ran red with blood and 200,000 men fought for the future of their civilizations, still reverberate through history. Now you know the story of history's largest naval battle, the 5 hours when Christianity and Islam clashed for Mediterranean supremacy and changed the balance of power forever. If this tale of desperate alliance and decisive combat fascinates you, if you want to explore more moments when outnumbered forces defied expectations and single battles altered civilizational trajectories, then subscribe to Flow of History right now. We bring you the epic confrontations that shaped our world, from ancient warfare to medieval sieges, from impossible victories to legendary commanders. These aren't just historical dates. They're stories of human courage, strategic brilliance, and the moments when everything hung in balance. Join our community exploring the battles that determined which civilizations survived and which fell. Hit subscribe for Flow of History because more incredible tales of combat, strategy, and world-changing victories await. And you won't want to miss what comes next.